Greetings. Welcome to a new episode of Art Matters. I'm your host, Wayne Quackenbush, and today I'll be talking to two artists from southern New England, and we'll be exploring their process and their work. And first of all, I'd like to introduce Rachel Brask, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
And we want to start off with a little biography about how you got into art and what inspires you, and talk a little bit about your work, and we'll be sharing some of your work.
Sure. Thank you very much for having me here today. I got into art from just loving color and loving texture and just the vibrancy of it. I was mentioning earlier that when I was a child, I used to pretend that I could capture color just while I was out riding or riding my bike. And imagining I could capture that color and put it into like a little bag, and imaginary bag, and use it for magic, pretend later on. And I was always drawn to Monet and Rothko and Van Gogh, and just their sense of expressions and color and light and texture. So I always wanted to be an artist when I was a kid. Went to art school, had a roundabout sort of meandering career thing, but doing art and painting. I was always drawn to landscape, was kind of my first love. I love painting trees and rivers and everything that is natural. And it wasn't until I discovered abstract, non-objective abstract, just after in college, and then I painted non-objective abstract for about 10 years, give or take, and then discovered this concept and this idea of doing sort of rain in a textured sort of way that kind of brings back around that. The abstract brings it back around full circle, sort of back to landscape.
Now, you mentioned those three artists. Can you talk a little bit, for those who might not be familiar with their work, what they might have in common? Because some people would say that they're very different from each other.
Yeah, I always connect most with the Impressionists, and so if you want to talk about Van Gogh, Mary Cassatt, Monet, his water lilies, or his ability to look at one location at different times of day in different settings of light, and capturing those colors and how they change.
Colors, but Van Gogh would go a step further and get the truth of the emotion behind it.
Yes, exactly.
And wouldn't that connect to Rothko, who was non-representational?
Yes, with Rothko, I am really moved by Rothko's color fields and sort of the sanctity he found in the color and in the paint and in the material itself. And all of them, just I kind of take elements of inspiration from each.
There's almost there is a spiritual connection.
Yes.
Between those guys.
Yeah.
And Monet, of course, was another impressionist.
Yes.
I'm sorry I interrupted your flow there. We were going to talk about where you went to school and your experience. Like you started to talk about your transition.
Yes, I went to between abstract and landscape and all that.
Yeah.
Loved landscape. Discovered abstract. I didn't even think abstract was a thing until I discovered it was a thing, and I loved it. And so the work that I did for a while was very swirly, lots of geometry, very just expressive, exploring color. And one day, out of the blue, it was a fall day, and it was just a beautiful fall day, and it was raining out the studio windows, and I just wanted to capture that. I wasn't even thinking very much about how to do it or what to do, and I just made an autumn rain painting. And that painting, and then I went back to my swirly abstract stuff. So that autumn rain painting ended up later on selling, one of my first selling paintings, and ended up winning an award.
Oh, wow.
And then I continued, at that point, making marks in my sketchbook of like, oh, let's try a winter rain, a spring rain, a tropical rain, an ocean rain. And then I got sidetracked by non-objective expressionism and kind of went in the opposite direction. It wasn't until a client came out of the woodwork many years later and said, hey, I saw this autumn rain painting on your website, can I buy it? I'm like, well, that one's already sold, but you can commission me to make a similar one. And at that point, I was really grateful for the opportunity, because then I had to kind of get back on the bike and rediscover exactly what process that I used to create the rain paintings that I did, because it had been a number of years. So I had to do trial and error to discover the right sort of ratio of stand oil to oil paint to dots to texture to all the things that I'll get into in the process.
You're gonna describe how you do it, but I mean, you're working in oils, and it's kind of a, to put it easily, a drip technique, yes?
So yes and no.
Okay.
It's a common misconception in my work that it's just very easily just a drip. Like I set a bunch of drips and they go, and then I walk away from the canvas and I'm done. It's actually much more intensive than appears to the final product.
Well, we could
if I can
refer to actual
this.
artwork and see, you can describe a little bit more about what's going on.
Yeah, sure. So I am inspired by seasons. So this orangey one sort of over here is inspired by the concept of sort of replicating that autumn rain or like a field. But all of them are the idea that you're looking at something, but you're looking through a lens when it's raining out. And so whatever you're looking at gets distorted by the drips, by the color, by the texture. And over here, this one was created during a residency in the Blue Ridge Mountains. And so while I was looking at the Blue Ridge Mountains, it was a beautiful day. It was very summery in spring. There was a little reflection. So even sometimes when I'm painting what I'm painting, it gets distorted by even what's on the bottom part of the canvas versus the top, because what I do paint does kind of get changed by the time that
you're
it
working
gets
with
to the
gravity,
bottom.
right?
Yes, I am working with gravity, and
And
sometimes I'm working against gravity, because I'll actually try and use a brush to actually push paint drops up the canvas before they drip back down again.
And yet there's no indication of any brushwork in there.
There is a lot of brushwork.
All right.
I assure you of that. In this one, this was if you're looking at sort of a foggy day. This particular one was Bar Harbor, but it could be any sort of island or series of things, sort of in the distance on just a foggy day. Everything sort of meshed together, and then
So
a
it's
sunset.
so the canvas itself physically becomes a window.
The canvas itself,
or a lens.
yes, physically becomes sort of a view, and that could be even on a sunny day that something is raining, because I in my artwork like to use that rainy day lens to magnify the colors, because sometimes rainy days the colors are a little bit brighter, things are a little more saturated. I like to celebrate with rain, just how rain is so necessary for life, for spring, for cleansing, for kind of a pause that we need when we need to sort of reset, or when our plans get messed up when rain comes through, so we have to kind of like adjust everything.
Yeah, there's a lot of work
then-
and a lot of play that you can't do when it's
Yeah.
raining. And
Yeah.
So it is a time for contemplation
Yes,
and relaxation, hopefully.
yes, exactly. And even in my process, what I'm creating actually starts out one way, and then I basically destroy it, like rain kind of sometimes destroys
Do you
things.
want to talk about your demo
And
piece there?
yes,
Yeah.
thank you so much for asking. I would be delighted to.
Okay.
So in this demo piece, all of my paintings start out as a million dots. And so I'm also inspired by Seurat and the pointillists.
Right.
So this is just the underpainting, this strip right here. And I use a dot brush, or a very thick brush, and I apply a lot of little dots, really thick oil paint. It's probably like a 1/4 inch to 1/8 of an inch sticking out over the canvas. And I apply it in a combination or composition with the anticipation that all the colors will blend together with what's
Right.
next to them, and then with what is beneath them. And so once I put all the dots on the canvas, and it's a very tedious, very time-consuming process, just putting them all on there how I want, then I use a material that is called stand oil, if we're not familiar with it. These are all oil paints. So stand oil is a linseed-based product that has the texture and the viscosity of honey. And so when I actually go and do the next phase, I take a brush, and this is the stand oil. If you can get that, it's really runny, it's really sticky. It's kind of yellowish in tone, but it dries clear. So I'm going to put that right there. So what I do next is I drip my entire brush in the stand oil, get it really loaded up, and I'll actually apply pressure and drag from the top to the bottom of the canvas, kind of like a squeegee, but as I'm doing it, I actually move the brush a little bit, so that way what that does is it causes the colors, the paint even more to get squished into the tooth of the canvas, as well as to mix with the colors next to it and then below that, and then drag all the color down.
So you're merging
Now,
your underpainting.
yes, pretty much. And so if I just did that step and did nothing else, you would get this, this strip right here. All right, so that's just one pass of the stand oil. I should have clarified this section right here is if I just drip the stand oil over the dots and apply no brushwork, just so that way, that section right there. Now this next section right here is after I've applied the stand oil and used the brush to apply pressure and drag from the top to the bottom, then I take fan brush and I'll actually go in and I'll blend a little bit more of the paint, sort of almost airbrushing it, because I'm barely touching the canvas, but I want the colors to continue to blend together, so that way they're sort of getting along with their neighbor colors and kind of working. Now, as I'm doing this, everything is dripping, so everything is actively moving very slowly because of this texture.
Oh, because of, yeah.
Yes.
So,
And so
it's not like you're hurrying because everything's running off the painting.
Yes, so I have to do this entire process in the first 24 to 48 hours, alla prima, while it's wet. And it's a very frantic process. Then this section, this sort of wider section here, is what happens when I go in every hour, pretty much almost on the hour with a smaller fan brush, and I'm editing the drips. So some of them I'll help them along, I'll sort of smush, drag them down the canvas more. Some drips, as they come out, I will take the drip out, clean my brush, and remove the drip, effectively deleting it. And then it's constantly fanning the drips back up to the top. So if there's a certain drip I really like where it is in the painting, which you might see there's some sort of suspended drips in some of these.
Yeah.
Those are a result of trying to keep that drip suspended while it continues to drip for 2 to 3 days after. The most dangerous part of this—
not even touched. So,
yeah. The most dangerous part of this is at night I have to sleep. Everyone needs sleep. I love sleep. But gravity continues to work on the painting while I'm asleep. So the next morning, it's often a completely different painting.
Have you ever turned them upside down to retard things?
So that's an interesting question. I have not specifically for that, but overnight I will turn the easel at a much more
to change the
deeper
rate of
angle,
flow.
so to slow the rate of flow overnight. But I also kind of like the surprise of the next morning not knowing how much the painting's going to move, because this process, as much as it is about rain and about paint and about color, it's also about wanting to let go, and that process of letting go and then reacting and then letting go and reacting.
Yeah.
Because we can't change things, but we can make something beautiful.
You're kind of capturing the passage of time.
Yes.
And even if you put the painting on its back, it would continue to change.
It does.
But strangely in a smaller way.
Yeah, they'll continue to drip for up to a certain point and form a skin, and then I have to kind of slow the painting down and move to the next one.
Right. So we're getting close to the end here, and you wanted to talk about the environment and how the environment will interact with your work. And
so the paintings that I do when they're drying, sometimes there will be too much paint, or they will run too fast, or there might get a bug that I have to remove that gets stuck in the stickiness of the stand oil. Also, humidity and warmth or cold affects the drying rate, and so that will affect how quickly the drips drop from the rain, just like the weather. It changes.
And how long does it take for these to dry then?
It takes about 4 to 5 days for them to form a skin, and then several weeks for the painting to fully dry.
Right. And so, again, I wanted to thank you for coming by and sharing all of this with us. And you revealed all your secrets now.
Did I reveal too many secrets?
We'll see how many paintings show up like that.
Okay.
But thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, Wayne, for having me.
Okay.
Thank you.
We're here with our next guest, the artist Nina Pfanstiehl. welcome to the show, Nina.
Thank you for having me, Wayne.
Good to see you. We've known each other quite a while.
Probably around 17 years, maybe?
It could be.
Goes back a ways. I think around 2005.
Yeah, absolutely. So are you originally from Newport?
No, my mom is from Newport, but I'm from Connecticut. I was born and raised there, but I've spent summers and weekends here, and I went to Salve for a few years too. And then after I graduated college from Eastern eventually, I came back here.
And
then Florida.
you've
and then
also been interested in art since for a young age. What piqued your interest when you were very young?
Well,
what inspired you?
My mom is an artist, so she wasn't working as an artist when I was growing up. She was getting her college degree, and then she was teaching special ed. But when she retired is when she got back into art.
Yeah, she became quite a proficient watercolorist, mostly, right? Yeah, and very well known in the Newport community. And you have done a lot of two-dimensional work, but in the time that I've known you, you've been doing a lot with ceramics and jewelry, and you've been exploring different techniques. And a lot of the stuff you do is based on the human form or scaled to the human form in some way or another. Do you want to talk about any of the pieces and what you did to get them in the shape that they are? If you pick up something, the camera can zero in on it and we can...
Okay. Where to start? Well, figures, for example, like...
if you bring her over to you, I can move this out of the way.
Okay, this one here. Well, this is the one that's in the book, too. But,
Yep.
This one is pretty easy to see where it started. I extruded a tube, a round cylinder of clay. And then from that, then I worked it and sculpted, and you add on to it and you know, created a figure. And
Now, it's in a book about raku firing.
right, which is the process that was used for this particular
Which
piece.
is what you would have to explain to our home audience.
Yeah, raku firing is when you take, you fire the piece, it's at a different cone setting than regular ceramics. And then when you do the glaze part, you put it in it goes into the kiln outside at a lower setting, and when it comes out, instead of just cooling normally, you put it in a trash can full of newspapers, which lights on fire, and then you put the lid on it, and it smokes, and the taking away of the oxygen makes the copper come out in the glaze. As you can see in
Okay,
here,
so that green color is the copper?
right, and we're showing the copper here. This is, and the green, that's all one glaze.
Oh, when you hold it up, I can see the reflection of the copper
right, and you
in
can
there.
see it in different areas.
Yeah, you might as well turn it around so people can see the full effect. And
And then over time, this changes too.
now this is a very traditional technique, right?
Japanese,
That's
yes,
what I thought.
originally.
And obviously, you're not using electricity or gas. Is it a wood
We're
fire
using gas for
the kiln?
for the kiln, yeah, propane.
Okay,
For
because
the kiln for the firing. It's
obvious-
not quite the same way the Japanese did it.
right,
It's the
because they
American
used to have
version.
like a fire, right? And wouldn't it have been a fire kiln? And well,
Probably,
anyway.
yeah. Yeah, I'm not familiar with all the
Okay.
techniques. I know how they did it in the American version, and it started in the 60s, I believe.
But you're kind of inviting chance.
Yes, it's like Christmas. You never know what you're going
Right,
to get.
right.
And then also what happens is any part of the clay that you leave bare will turn black from the smoke. So you can figure that into your design element as, you know, for contrast and whatnot.
And where does the white come from?
That is a glaze. It's a white glaze, and what you can get in that sometimes is crackling. You know, it's hard to see on this one, it's really small, but you can get different types of crackling that will show up, and crazing. Oh, actually, you can see it right here. I don't know if
Okay.
you can see that on the camera.
Yep.
But you can see some crackling
And
there.
you added wire to it?
Yes.
For the armbands?
Yeah, because I do jewelry, so I also like to put jewelry on some of my pieces as well.
And do you want to talk a little bit about what the concept behind it, or
Well, the concept is I extrude the clay and then I let it take me where it wants to go.
okay? So
I didn't
obviously,
have,
this is a human form, and you have a gap in the throat and chest, and
That's just how I did it. I
Okay,
mean,
that's
I don't
fine.
sketch it out first. There's no rhyme or reason. I don't sit there and all I had in mind when I started was that I was going to make a female figure.
Right.
And I did a series of them, and I have 2 of them here.
Pass me this one, and I'll
Okay.
pass you the other one. And we're going to do show and tell.
Yeah, this is the Empress, and she is also from an extruded tube, the same size tube actually. And so I added more on for this. And then a lot of times how the edge of the clay is on the tube determined what the headpiece was going to be
Oh, I see.
on it. And this one here, it was because of the way it was shaped is what became her headpiece. And then this one too had a little bit of a happy accident. She was high up on a shelf drying out and got knocked over. And she fell and it flattened this area here and it put this crease in
Oh
her
my
headpiece.
God, okay.
And I wound up liking it. So
All right.
those are just one of those chance
Well,
things
you were
that
saying
works
earlier
out well.
that how much you liked fantasy and fantasy figures, and this is really evocative of a country that doesn't really exist,
Exactly,
but
yes.
also a representation of female power because she's the Empress, right?
Yes, this is true.
Now
So there's
you-
a lot of subconscious stuff that goes
I've always
into
loved
it.
your, you like to render the Venus of Willendorf.
Yes, this is just sort of, you know, a fertility goddess, Mother Earth kind
now,
of thing.
Is she hollow?
Yes, she is.
Yeah.
She is actually
Oh,
like a
she's
vase.
a-
Her head comes off, you know. Up with your head. There you go. And she's Raku as well.
That was Raku as well, and you have the crackling here that you were talking about.
Right.
Yep.
And this one is also Raku. This is, before I did the figures, I was doing wall faces because I didn't have a lot of space to put things, and so I could hang these sculptures on the wall because my apartment is small.
Now, was that completely split, and then you stitched her back together, or is there?
Nope, I made the face, and I just put I just carved that into the clay, and poked the holes, and made that. Decided that was what I wanted the
And
design
you
to
did
be.
that
That I
before
was
the
gonna.
firing, right?
Yes, putting the holes in. Yeah.
Yeah. So, when you're talking about the Raku firing and the unglazed, so the black flat side, that's just the clay.
Right. There's no
Okay.
glaze on it at all, and then the rest of it is one glaze. And this one you can really see the copper effect. In
And
this
you
particular.
also you left this unglazed,
Yep.
and you can see the green and the copper highlights is,
Yeah,
is
this
the
is
copper glaze.
a reddish copper.
And what did you do to the back? Did you leave that unprocessed?
Yeah. Well, I did put a little glaze on the inside
Okay,
of the back
cool.
for some reason, but
No.
you can't have, you know, when it's being fired, you can't have any glaze touching the shelf because then it would stick to the shelf. So,
Right.
and then there's another form of dealing with clay as opposed to glazing, and that's pit fire. And these 2 pieces are pit fired.
And that was what I was confusing the Raku with.
Yeah, pit fire is where you dig a pit
And you
and
build
then you put your pieces in and you cover them up with seaweed mostly.
Right.
And then you cover that with wood. And it's, again, another surprise. You don't know what you're going to get. And there's a couple of other things you can do. This one, I'm going to sound stupid, but I forgot the name. I think it's sort of an engob or something like that you put over this. So this tan is painted on the bare white clay to give it some more color. And then the seaweed does the additional coloring on it.
So is that a glaze?
It's not a glaze, no. It's more like a slip almost,
Because it's
like a colored slip.
it must be a lower temperature than glaze firing.
When you do your bisque firing, you don't do a glaze firing. You just
Oh,
do
I
a
see.
bisque, and then this is painted on almost like you do an underglaze.
And you did that at the same time as you did the bisque firing?
Right. This was painted on the raw clay before it was bisque fired.
And is that sectional too? Is that a?
Yeah.
It is.
This one
Okay.
also comes off.
Okay.
This one won a prize at South County.
And a very, very organic figure it is.
Yes. Some of them look sort of like things.
Yep.
We won't go into that though.
Yep.
This is my pregnant pear, and this one I also use wire, copper wire. If you wrap wire around it, you'll get the shadow of it. It burns on.
Oh,
and
does the wire burn away, or is it
Right.
still? Oh, wow.
yeah, sometimes it'll still be some of it there, but it's crumbly.
And what's this patterning?
That is seaweed. And then this is just more, this is what you get from the smoke from the fire.
Oh, that's intense.
And basically, you let the fire burn like overnight till it
And is
burns
it,
out, and then you dig them out afterwards
What's
and
the bottom of that look like?
find out what you get.
Oh, okay. Yep. All right.
But this here all was from wire, and that's the seaweed and the smoke. So pit fire is a lot of fun too.
Sure.
And then you have regular glazing pieces like this face here.
Yep.
And this one's a lot more organic as opposed to this one, which is more sculpted. And she has earrings too.
So you get to use the facial form as a way to show off your jewelry, your wire jewelry.
Yeah, although you can't actually wear those as earrings. I mean, if I took them off and put them on wires, you could.
Yeah, you
but
could adapt
They're
that.
permanent.
Right.
But I just like to add the jewelry in there because I do it. So it just gives
Are
it
there
another
any
dimension.
stories behind these faces, or are they just did you just had your way with them and then they just came out the way they did?
Pretty much, yeah. I just sort of put the clay on and let it go where it wants to go. But you can see I have a lot of influences of ancient cultures in a lot of
Yes.
these pieces.
Uh-huh.
There'll be some that look more African, others look more pre-Columbian, or South American, or
Well, you get this
just
combination,
Egyptian, all different places.
that makes them look otherworldly, which is, go back to your fantasy. So hand me that one, and then
Okay.
you can show me the facade that you have there.
Ah, yes. This is it's a
Now
bed and
hold
breakfast.
Hold it up
Here?
on the, put the bottom on the table, and so
Oops.
we can get a better.
How about I move that one too?
Yeah, I'll take that.
Thanks. This I just call Victorian storefront. It's part of a bed and breakfast that is across from the Viking Hotel.
Yes, in
And-
Newport.
Exactly, and I've always been fascinated by it because of its bright fuchsia door,
Yes,
and it's very, very colorful.
and you did a series of these a while ago.
Yes, I did. I did a whole series. I did the Senior Citizen Center, the Edward King House, which was the library when I was growing up. So on the back side of it, I made a library.
I never knew that. Okay.
Yeah, that was when I read my books as a kid when they had card catalogs and everything.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
And I did what was the Victorian Lady Bed and Breakfast also. I like Victorian houses. I like the architecture.
Yeah,
To me, it's fascinating, all the different details. And
yeah.
So,
back
it's,
when
fun, but
people
very-
could afford to do stuff like that.
Yep.
Now, you want to talk a little bit about your jewelry because we're getting close to the end.
wow, it goes by fast, doesn't it?
Sure does.
Okay, what I did with these is instead of using stones, I make the pieces out of clay. And then, so this is a raku cabochon.
Right.
And then I just use sterling silver wire and do a wrap on
Okay,
it.
you just did a new vocabulary word, cabochon.
Cabochon is the name for a stone that's cut basically usually like an oval
Oh, okay.
or a
All right.
square that has some,
Yep.
it's either rounded or faceted or whatever.
Okay.
And I started off when I was first doing jewelry. I was doing it before I did the clay, actually. And I was wrapping stones. And then I started doing sculpture. And I thought, well, why don't I make my own?
Combination.
And so I have, let's see, these are raku. This one I actually melted some fine silver into.
Oh, boy.
And these are regular glazes. And then I wrap them in. Each one I do different. And
Now, what happens when you melt silver into a glaze?
it just sort of
it's just-
settles in there.
Okay, so it's kind of shiny, and the black is unglazed? My eyes aren't good at this
The
distance.
back side is black, that's unglazed.
All right.
But this is a blue on
Okay.
here.
All right, we're going to have to wrap it up now. Nina, see, we got through it, and thank you so much for taking the time to come down here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
And that wraps up another episode of Art Matters with Wayne Quackenbush. Join us next time for the more interviews.